Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
The largest international crime after drug dealing, gun running, and money laundering is art theft. One man went undercover to try to save some of the world's finest treasures, and we'll talk with him. Stay tuned. Dialogue is next. Hello, I'm Joan Cartan-Hansen. Thank you for joining us here on Idaho Public Television, on the World Wide Web, and on public radio stations. Stealing art is a big business, about $6 billion a year. As the founder of the FBI's art crime team, Robert Whitman knows the thrill of recovering a stolen Rembrandt, or saving Geronimo's eagle feather headdress, or even uncovering an art scam by former Antiques Roadshow appraisers. In his book, Priceless: How I Went Undercover to Rescue the World's Stolen Treasures, Robert Whitman describes how he got started solving art thefts and how he eventually came to be called the most famous art detective in the world. Mr. Whitman is in Idaho to speak on behalf of the Boise Art Museum, and he joins me now. Thank you, sir, for being here. I appreciate it.
Hey, hi, Joan. How you doing? Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to meet you. Yeah. Your book is wonderful. It's a rollicking is the word that they describe a lot of it, and a lot of it begins with that story of how you got started solving art crime. What was that first case like?
I never actually, when I joined the FBI in 1988, I had no inkling or clue that was going to be what I was going to be doing. I had been transferred from, I actually came in through Baltimore. I was transferred to Philadelphia, and I'll never forget the agent that was doing the hiring. He was telling me, as he was trying to convince me to join, he said, you know, one of these days, he said, you could be out in a high-powered car with a high-powered like shotgun, and you'll be the only law for 50 miles around if you're on one of the reservations. He said, it's an amazing situation. So I was in Baltimore, which is right between Washington and Philadelphia and New York. It's on the East Coast there with all the people, and I thought that would be interesting to be out there. And of course, what they do, they sent me right to Philadelphia. So I was the only law enforcement for 5 feet, you know, around. But when I got there, I was actually put on a truck hijacking squad, and I had no inkling about art. But right the month before I arrived, there were 2 museums in Philadelphia that were robbed. One was the Rodin Museum, which is part of the Philadelphia Museum of Art. It's the largest holdings of Rodin's pieces outside of France. And the other was the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, where a piece was stolen called the Crystal Ball. And the Crystal Ball was a crystal ball, exactly what it is, the second largest in the world, more than 50 pounds in weight, and it was owned by the Dowager Empress of China. So as a result of being there and being the, quote, new guy, I was given those cases. And within a year and a half, we had them both solved. At that point, I was pigeonholed into doing art theft investigations. But see, what the FBI didn't realize was that my parents were in the antiques business. So as a result, I did know how to do an art deal. I had grown up around the whole business. And what your watchers might not know is, you know, when we talk about art crime, it's not art history and it's not the creation of art. It is about the art business, which is one of the biggest businesses in the world.
It is $6 billion, and that's just a conservative estimate of the cost of art theft. And you have some wonderful myths about art theft. Let me run through that. Art thieves are dashing rogues like Pierce Brosnan in the remake of the Thomas Crown Affair, or George Clooney in Ocean's 12. Not true.
Not so much. I never really met any art thieves that you know, acted like that or were dashing in that manner. Generally speaking, many of them were were pretty common people, to be honest. Many of the art people who were involved in art theft and doing armed robberies, that was just another crime they were committing. They were involved in many different types of criminal enterprises, like gun running, drugs, stolen automobiles, stolen cars, that type of thing. So the last thing that they had done was an art theft. And we were working on that case, but they were involved in many types of criminal enterprises.
In a previous interview, you said that a number of criminals now steal art to hold it as hostage in case they're arrested on another crime, that they can use it as a plea bargain to get out of serious charges.
And not so much in the U.S., but in Europe, there's a lot of armed robberies of museums. Probably, I think of 25 since in the past 10 years of large, heists from museums at gunpoint. And the reason they're doing it, a lot of it is because they always want to make money. But when they find out that they can't sell the art, because you see, art is not like a car. You can chop a car up and literally get more money for the parts than the car is worth. When you sell drugs, you can cut drugs up and knock it down to smaller units and sell it as well. Art, you can't do that to. When you steal a painting, it has to be in good condition. It's got to be exactly as it was. If you change it in any way, it loses value. So what happens is they steal it. They think about the value of what it could be worth, and they don't think about the fact that they can't sell it.
Yeah, that's the next myth, that art crime pays. You get, what, 10% of the
Well,
value?
the going rate in the underworld supposedly is 10%. That's what they asked for, but they don't get the 10% because if you steal a $10 million painting, that supposes you're going to get $1 million in the black market. What doesn't happen? They're lucky if they get anything. And usually what happens is we recover the art when it comes back to market. That means, either they hold it so long that they move on and somebody finds it and tries to auction it, and then we hear about it, or they decide to try to sell it actively, and then usually law enforcement gets involved, and that's what I made a career of doing, going undercover to buy these pieces back.
It's another myth that stolen art rarely resurfaces, that it actually does sometimes come back.
It does resurface. I mean, sometimes it might take 20 years. One case I was involved with, which was a original copy of the Bill of Rights it was stolen in 1865, and by a Union trooper, but we actually got it back in 2003. So, that took a long time, but it came back.
But it came back. The other one is most art crimes don't take place in a museum. It's only 10% are in museums.
Yeah.
That's a myth, that the museum is the key place.
Museum heists are rare, and there's few. Most art crime, and many times too, what we have to understand, Joan, is that art crime's not just theft. It also involves frauds, forgeries, and fakes.
Right.
That's the major part of the industry. That $6 billion number you're talking about is the actual, the underworld number worldwide of art crime. But it's frauds, forgeries, and fakes that are really more prevalent than theft. Theft is a smaller, portion of that $6 billion.
And your last myth is that art crime is victimless.
Yeah, that's absolutely untrue. When someone steals a Monet or a Renoir or a Rembrandt from a museum, and takes it out of our site, it has millions of victims. Everyone is a victim, of art crime. One case I was involved with the FBI in Sweden and in Copenhagen involved a Rembrandt that had been stolen from the Swedish National Museum. And in that case, we ended up recovering it in Copenhagen in an undercover operation. The United States, Denmark, and Sweden all worked together to get this one painting back. Why? Because all of humanity is a victim when a piece like that is taken, because we all need to look at that. We all need to learn from it. It's a masterpiece.
So this is the picture of the Rembrandt that you recovered. Tell us that story.
Yeah. What happened was there was a armed robbery from the Swedish National Museum. That was in 2000, late December. 3 individuals went into the museum. They went in at gunpoint. Two of the men ran around the museum and stole 3 paintings, 2 by Renoir and the Rembrandt. The Rembrandt was the most valuable. It was valued at about $36 million. In the next 5 years, we were able to recover the 2 Renoirs, one in Sweden, and actually one we recovered in Los Angeles. Once we got that one back, we started to be able to get information about where the Rembrandt was, and it was still in Sweden. So once we learned that, we set up an undercover operation. We actually did it in Denmark, in Copenhagen, in a hotel there, where we lured the thieves to bring it to me. In that particular case, I was acting undercover as a buyer for the I guess you'd call the Russian mob, and we were able to have them bring it to us, and we lured them to us, and we were able to recover it. But the sale price for that $36 million Rembrandt was $250,000.
That's a pretty good bargain.
Well, yeah,
if you're going to get to keep it.
If you get to keep the money.
You're being pretty sparse with the details. This is a pretty exciting story. These were not. I mean, there was a lot of back and forth on trying to get that actual Rembrandt out. Give us a few more details.
Oh, sure. Well, it was an interesting case. It took us quite a while, about 6 months to do it. By the time we were ready, we had a number of meetings at the hotel with the individuals that had the painting. In the end, they did a pretty good job. They They were doing counter surveillance against us to make sure that we were for real. At one point, they were coming down on the train to meet with us because it's about a 5-hour train ride from Stockholm to Copenhagen. 3 of them came down. They brought a bag with them, and inside the bag was a square object the size of the painting. And the Swedish police, they said, should we arrest them? They're coming. And I said, no, just hold off, wait and see what happens. Once they made it to Copenhagen, the Danish police started following them, doing surveillance, and they asked, should we arrest them? I said, no, let them come, let them bring it to us. So finally, the 2 individuals came to my hotel room. The one with the bag stayed outside. As they came in, they wanted to see the money, then count all the money, which we did. We gave them, let them have a chance to do that. Once they were satisfied, I said, okay, you're done. Now go get me the painting. Okay, I don't know where it is. At that point, of course, I knew, but I couldn't say. So they left. At that moment, I get a call about 5 minutes later. It's from the Danish police. They say they ran away. I said, what do you mean they ran away? They said they took off. What did you say? Did you say something wrong? And they asked me. And I'll tell you, at that moment, I was sweating bullets. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what did I say? And I started pacing. I said, just follow them. I said, don't arrest them yet. If they get on the train, then take them off. Well, what happened was they called me back about 5 minutes later, and they said they had run to another hotel where a 4th individual had come the night before. So that bag that they were carrying was just a decoy. So had we stopped them, the Swedish police or the Danish police, at any time if they had stopped them, we'd have nothing. Okay. So they went to the other hotel, and the other person had come down the night before. He had the painting. They came back, and then we did the deal finally. We looked at the painting. It was right. It was actually the one. And at that point, I called in the SWAT team, and they came. At first, the door wouldn't open. It was one of those key cards.
Don't we all love those key things?
You never know what's going to happen, So they came, they tried to use the key card, and I'm waiting, and nothing's happening, and that's the longest, 3 minutes of your life when you're
and what
sitting
do you
there.
say when someone's trying to get in your door and you've got this, what?
I was hiding in the bathroom.
The smart man.
At that point. So when the door wouldn't open, I just reached out real quickly and opened it, and they came in, and they were able to effect the arrest and recover the painting, which was in good shape. And within a week, it was actually back in the Swedish National Museum on display.
It was interesting with that Rembrandt. What you were looking for was not the front of the painting, but the back of the painting.
Oh yeah, oftentimes the back of the paintings are just as important as the fronts when it comes to identification and for security. And that's another thing I talk about in my talks and when I go out on the road like this, is I emphasize the importance of security for both collectors, museums, and galleries. I mean, and collectors too. I mean, many times, a lot of the thefts around the country, around the world, happen from collectors in their homes and whatnot. So security, and that's sometimes the last thought, is to have a good security system. So what I try to do is make sure that the collectors realize how important it is too. But on the back of the painting was just as important because there's many things that identify the painting that are not reproduced when someone does a reproduction or a fake.
Because they don't know how the screws are put in.
Exactly.
And what the clips, how the clips are fit.
Yeah, in this particular case, there were 4 clips, and I had a picture of the back that the museum had supplied us, and the clips were at a certain angle. So when I looked at the back of the painting, I could see the clips hadn't been moved. So in fact, I said to one of the thieves, I said, you never even took it out of the frame, did you? And it was surprising because he looked at me and he was shocked, and he said, of course not. It's a Rembrandt.
Yeah, of course not.
So he actually had appreciation for the painting too.
But not everybody has an appreciation for it. The person who had the crystal ball. Where did you find that?
Well, that was an interesting case. That took us about a year and a half to finally find that piece. We got a lead on where it was at, so we went to the person's home. It was a row house in South Philadelphia. So we walked in, and we said to the gentleman who was there, in the house, we said, what do you know about we call it a bowling ball, all right, or a lawn ball, because we didn't want to give off that it was the crystal ball.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he said, you mean a crystal ball? I said, oh yeah, I'm trying to be slick here, know. I said, right, the crystal ball. I said, do you know anything about that? And he said, yeah. He said, that was in my mud cellar, and somebody had left it there. Now see, that's what happened. And then when they stole it from the museum, we think it was maybe a frat prank, because they took the ball.
That's an expensive frat prank.
Absolutely, it was 54 pounds. And they also took a Egyptian statue of an Egyptian god called Osiris, which was very heavy as well. So they took both pieces. And we think that it was just too much weight for them to carry, because they were doing work on the museum, and some of the doors were being propped open by the workers. So that night, we thought, and this is back in 1989, people weren't as conscious at the time of the value of these pieces and the security that was involved. So when we spoke to the gentleman, he said, yeah, I had a crystal ball too. And I said, well, what'd you do with it? He said, well, I gave it to my housekeeper. And I'll never forget, I said, your housekeeper? I said, well, why would you want to give something to your housekeeper? And he said, well, because she's a witch.
Oh, well, yeah.
A witch. Okay. And what it turned out, she was a young woman, about 25 years old, had blonde hair, very pretty. And he liked her, okay, and he gave her the ball because she was a good witch. Okay. So good thing she was a good witch, not a bad witch. Okay. Yeah. So she happened to live in Trenton, New Jersey, and we were in Philadelphia. So my partner and I, both FBI agents, we drove up to Trenton, knocked on the door, and we said, we had the gentleman call her to tell her that there were some insurance people on the way to see the crystal ball. Yeah. So we knocked on the door, and she answered the door, and I said, we're here to see the ball, that you had. Your crystal ball. You're the good witch, right? And she said, yeah, I'm the good witch. So she took us into the house, and she took us upstairs to her bedroom, believe it or not, and on her dresser was this 54-pound crystal ball. It took 10 years to make this in a cylinder being ground by diamond dust in Peking, in China. And we're looking at it, and she had her her boyfriend's baseball cap on. And that's how it was sitting there.
So she didn't have quite the appreciation.
No,
how much was it worth?
About $350,000.
There you go.
And she had no idea, what she had. And when she did, I thought she was going to pass out. But anyway, all's well that ends well. We did get it back at that point, and it worked out well.
It's apparent through your memoir that the art was more important. Recovering the art was more important than catching the criminal.
Right. Well, I always felt that way. Catching a criminal is one thing, and that's an important thing that we needed to do, and we would do that anytime we could. But I always thought it was more important to try to recover the art in one piece, and get it back in as good a shape as possible, because, I always felt that we're just holders of this material. We're responsible for it, for our generation at this time. So, our parents did that for us, our grandparents did it for our parents, and we have to do that for our children. So the importance of the art is not, whether or not somebody goes to jail for 2 years or 3 years. That's just a blip in the history, the provenance of the piece. What's important is that we get it back so that people can enjoy it, can learn from it, and get emotion from the art.
One piece that most people may not think as art, but as more of an artifact, was the back flap.
Right.
Tell us about the back flap, and we have a picture of that.
Yeah, that was a very interesting case. That's a long story. The back flap was actually discovered in 1987. It was dug from a tomb in Peru, and it was one of the pieces that first came out of the tomb called the Lord of Sipan. Now, your watchers some of them might know about that. That was discovered in 87 in northern Peru, and in that tomb was more gold, all right, than it was actually discovered in King Tut's tomb. So that was a very interesting thing. I had never known that there was tombs in Peru with that much gold in them. So anyway, this piece was taken. It was the largest single piece of gold ever discovered in a tomb in the Americas, and it was stolen by looters. For about 10 years, from 87 to 97, it was underground in Peru, just being hidden. There were rumors about it, and it was a very famous piece. Okay, people knew of it because they had seen it. It was almost like Elvis. They would get there's back flap sightings, like Elvis sightings. So anyway, around 97, an individual from Miami contacted the FBI to say, one of my undercover companies, to say that he had access to it, and would we be interested in buying it? And we asked him, well, how much? And he said to me, well, $1.6 million for the piece. So I said, okay, look, if you can bring that piece to Philadelphia, I have a buyer who'd be interested in buying that, and we would pay $1.6 million for it. So he went back to Lima, and he had a person there that he had been working with, and he and his partner went to Lima. They bought the piece for $100,000. They took it to Panama, and then what they did was they had taken it to Newark, New Jersey, and they brought it in through Newark Airport to sell to me. Interestingly enough, while we were doing the negotiations, he said to me, we have a contact at the Panamanian Embassy in New York City, and this contact would be the one who would help us. So the way he talked about it, he intimated that it would be a lower level person, maybe who worked at the embassy, or who was maybe a cleaning person or a janitor or something like that. Well, as it turned out, it was the consul general.
Great.
It was the ambassador from the consulate in New York City, and he was the one who smuggled it into the country. So you can imagine my surprise when I met with them on a Jersey Turnpike, to look at this piece. And I'll never forget. I said, "Do you have it?" And they said, "Yes." So they pulled their car. They had pulled their car up. They opened the trunk for me. They opened up the suitcase, and wrapped up in the T-shirts and underwear was this beautiful back flap. It was a piece of gold about 2.5 feet high. It weighed about 4 pounds. And, you know, this is the first time in 2,000 years when anybody that, you know, official or anyone that was, you know, from the official or authorities could actually look at this piece as it came out of a tomb. It was just an amazing sight. So we ended up they followed me back to Philadelphia where we were going to get it authenticated by an expert. And when we did, of course, the experts were a series of FBI agents who were going to help me arrest these guys. And we did recover it.
The value of these things is not just inherently the gold, but the history that's involved.
Yeah, the tragedy of that, the great part is you get it back, okay? And now it's hanging in the Museum of Sipán in Peru. And it's in what they call the looted room. And that specific room in the museum are all pieces that have been recovered from around the world that were looted from that original tomb, the first tomb. They ended up finding 3. And the rest of the museum have beautiful displays of how they found everything. But the looted room's not. Looted room just is stuff. And the reason for that is because once it's taken out of situ, archaeologically, once it's been looted, it gives no information. You know, we can't learn anything about the culture, about the civilization, about anything about the burial because it's been desecrated. So all you have is beautiful stuff, you know, and not information about the civilization. That's what you lose when you have looting in archaeological sites.
And you speak with great passion, or you write with great passion. You and your co-author John Schiffman write about American artifacts, particularly a flag from a Civil War unit that was taken, the people who were conned out of Pickett's property.
Yeah, General Pickett's property, right.
And you mentioned earlier the Bill of Rights that you recovered from North Carolina.
Well, that's the thing I would tell your watchers too, is that there's so many people, your audience, there's so many people out there who, you know, they're con men. So you have to be really careful when you get involved in these things. You know, it takes a certain amount of knowledge to be able to identify and appraise these items. The con men from the Antiques Roadshow basically who
are no longer there.
No, they're gone. They're all out. But what they were doing was they were actually giving under appraisals to people around the country, families, and underpaying for material, conning them, you know, and basically, you know, turning around and selling it for high prices. And that's one of the things in the art industry that, you know, I've kind of tried to work against, even now that I'm out of the FBI and I started my own company, which is Robert Whitman Incorporated. I do investigations into theft. I do collection management, and I work with people to sell their collections when they need to, but based on just a percentage. And it's a percentage of the net that the collector gets for whatever he's selling. So there's no hidden agenda.
Right.
You know, I don't take it on consignment and sell it for 5 times what, you know, I tell the person. Nothing like that. It's, you know, we market it, we put it out the best way, we sell it for you, and you know exactly the whole process and who's paying what and everything about it. And basically, I work off a small percentage of it, and whatever you get, I get. And if it works out well, we both make out. And that's why I think that's the way it should be, rather than all this buy low, sell high, rip them off, you know. And
at what point is it fraud or a con, and at what point is it just I've got a good bargain?
Well, you know, I think that, you know, there's two answers to that question. One is the ethics, and one is the legality. Okay. And not always is things that are, not always is, ethics is always good. If you're ethical in how you deal and how you do your dealings, that's always good. You can be legal, but still
not be ethical.
And not be ethical,
yeah.
Exactly. I mean, you know, you can puff things, and you can say something's worth a certain amount and go a little bit lower, and try to buy it cheaply. That's fine. People do that all the time in negotiation. But if you have a certain knowledge and you walk in and you go 10% of some value on something because you're taking advantage of someone, it's legal, but it's not ethical. And that's what I think. Ethics in society is much more important than always trying to be just legal. You know.
Now you're in Idaho to speak at the Boise Art Museum. What are you going to tell folks?
Now we're going to talk about, you know, collection management. We're going to talk about security, as far as that's concerned. The importance of supporting the Boise Art Museum, which is a fabulous art museum, by the way. You know, I had a chance to take a look at it, and you know, with the book coming out and being a bestseller, I've been to museums all over the country, and Boise can be very proud to have one of the best, and probably the best in Idaho. So I know that's the only AAM certified museum. So I think they've done a great job, and the communities really should be commended for supporting such a great institution. So I'll be doing that, and then today we spoke to a number of students at Boise State University to talk about careers in the art field. Not as it just curator and just artist, but you can also be involved in insurance. You can be involved in appraisal. You can be involved in investigation, civil and international law, art law. All these are great careers in the art business that young people can think about. And I think it's important that they think outside the box, a little bit nowadays, because it's tough to get a job out there. So it's a good idea to think outside the box.
What piece of advice would you pass on to someone who unfortunately can't make the speech, but has something in their home they think is at least valuable to them?
Yeah.
What kind of security measures?
Well, I mean, if it's a unique item, take good photographs. All right, and not just digital, but to actually take film as well, because film does pick up certain parts that can be highlighted. Okay, and if it's not a unique piece, in other words, if it's a multiple, like a print or a vase, take a picture of what makes it unique. Now, you might have a small crack in the bottom, in the base somewhere, or if a little piece of the paint's chipped off on the vase, or something of that nature, or if it's a print and it's numbered, make sure you get a shot of the print and the number of it. Keep that somewhere safe. Don't just put it with it. Don't attach it to the back. Keep it somewhere safe. Where if someone gets the piece, you'll have that, because we need a good photograph to be able to identify it. So I mean that's an important thing you need to do for your collection management. In museums they call it object ID, and that's what you want to do. You want to create good object ID for your pieces. Secondly, then you want to look at physical security. Do you have motion detectors, depending on the value of your collection? Is there lighting? You have lighting. You have layered security. These are all the things that I look at when I go to a person's home or to an institution or a gallery to do a site security survey.
How thick is the wire holding it to the wall? Is it too
Exactly.
easy to cut?
Well, if it's that good a piece, maybe you don't want wire.
Yeah.
You want security bolts.
Yeah.
And there's certain types of bolts that go in that you can't take off.
Can't take it off.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, sir, we've run out of time.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
Now, we will talk more in our Web Extra, and I want to ask you about a practical joke you played with the Bill of Rights
okay.
when we come back. But right now, I just want to say thank you and let viewers know we have more information about Robert Whitman and art theft and recovery. Go to idahoptv.org and click on D4K. I also invite you to become a friend on Facebook or to follow us on Twitter. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you here next time on Dialogue.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho. Check out our website, like us on Facebook, or follow us on Twitter.